When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be exploring Aerys the Mad King, and we're going to be going through kind of a character analysis, but it's not going to be like my normal ones where I go through his entire life and everything that happens in his life. This video is going to be focused specifically on why he became mad. What were the key factors that led to that? And what kind of caused his insanity later in life? That's going to be the key of this video. So we're going to establish who he was as a younger person or a younger man, and how that developed into his older life and eventually his kingship, and what caused him to go insane. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, we are pretty close to 3,000 subscribers, or if maybe by the time this video comes out, we're already there. But again, so do that. And also, we are going to be doing a Q&A for 3,000 subscribers, so if you wanted to participate in that, if you had any questions for me regarding A Song of Ice and Fire, anything, it could be literally anything, personal life, whatever you guys want to ask, leave those down in the comments, and I will get to those. And let's get into the video. So, Aerys Targaryen is this character that we don't know the most about his early life. We know that, again, the most notable stuff we know here is that he did fight, or, well, we're not sure how much he actually fought, but he was on the Stepstones during the War of the Nine Penny Kings. So, why is this important? Well, one, we know that he makes a lot of friendships here. There's like this major trio that comes out of this where it's Stefan, Baratheon, Stannis, Robert, and Renly's father. Also, we see Tywin Lannister being a part of this group, and then Aerys Targaryen himself. This is a very powerful group. You have the future Lord of Storm's End, the future Lord of Casterly Rock, and also the future King. So you have three very prominent people that kind of come together. Now, the question is going to be here, well, Aerys, was he already mad early on in life? And I would distinctively say no. He was someone that in his youth, he had his flaws as a person, but he was definitely not mad, right? He was someone that was at least liked enough that he was able to make friends quite easily. He makes friends with Tywin and Stefan, and I know you could maybe take a more of a cynical look at it and say, well, maybe they were being friends with him because of the power he had, but I just don't see that being the case. I think that Stefan and Tywin really did like Aerys early on. So I think Aerys at least had some sort of an aura where people, liked him, or he was able to make friends relatively easy. And if you're someone that's mad or insane, that doesn't really necessarily happen. So I want to point that out because there's a lot of things that point to Aerys being kind of a normal guy early on in his life. Now, something I do want to point out with Aerys as a person, that's things that were out of control at this point. So Aerys was the son of Jaehaerys II, who wasn't king yet when I'm going to be talking about this point that I'm about to make, but Aerys, we know, ends up marrying his sister, Rhaella. That was not a decision that Aerys wanted. It's something that neither one of the two wanted. Aerys and Rhaella did not really like each other, which led to issues in their relationship. Now, they did have kids, as we'll see later on, but again, this was not a relationship that the two wanted. So what did that do? It caused Aerys to become someone that's very lusty. Now, something else I want to think about here is that why did Jaehaerys marry the two? Well, it was said that the prince that was promised would come of the line of Aerys and Rhaella. So that is why he eventually basically took it up with his father, Aegon V. Aegon V was actually still the king when Aerys and Rhaella were, being betrothed and or married. So again, that is why those two are married, but it's not a happy relationship. So that's going to point to some of the ideas of why Aerys becomes very similar to Robert, where he has a lot of mistresses. He has a lot of different people he sleeps with other than Rhaella. We get this idea that Rhaella had a lot of handmaidens that Aerys went after. There's the rumors that Aerys went after Joanna, or definitely had an attraction to her. And this could be one of those reasons that Aerys just did not really like Rhaella whatsoever. We don't know why the two didn't like each other. Maybe it was that Aerys did not have good qualities that Rhaella saw through. We're not really too sure on that idea. We know why the two didn't like each other later on in life, but at this point, very early on in their lives, I'm not sure exactly why they would have disliked each other outside of just incest is icky and maybe Rhaella didn't want it. I don't know. And so this kind of leads to, again, skipping a little bit ahead because we don't know a lot about Aerys' character early on in his life. We know much more of when he comes to become king, and then also when he, gets later in life where he's the Mad King. But I want to point something out here with Aerys. Aerys was not somebody that was just an evil guy. He had some things that he wanted to accomplish when he became king. He had the goal of wanting to be the best Targaryen king of all time. Now, I know, yeah, all the Targaryen kings want that, but Aerys had some things that were probably good ideas for the realm, but were just impossible. Aerys wanted to expand his realm. He wanted to conquer the Stepstones and bring them in as part of Westeros. He wanted to build another wall further than the wall we see in the north in the normal story. He wanted to, again, take over more land. He was someone that wanted to build, it seems like a new capital, because King's Landing stunk and it was just overpopulated. It's kind of a nasty place in general. But none of these were carried out. Again, it points to the idea that the Mad King Aerys was more of a dreamer than a doer. And when you look at who Aerys has as his hand, being in Tywin, it really puts a very stark difference between the two, where this is really where we see Aerys being this idea of he wants something done, but it's not feasible, so Tywin is the one that does the actual stuff for the realm. And that's going to put a major, rift between the two, right? And it's something that I think about it like this. Think about, your friend or one of your friends, right, that you've been very close with for a long time, and then put it into a situation where you had to live with them. Because that's basically what Aerys and Tywin are doing. The two were probably great friends leading up to here, but when you're in constant communication with them, you're having to talk about different political ideas or what you want for the country, it's going to test that friendship. And that's something that I think moving in with someone could test your friendship. You're going to learn more about their habits. You're going to learn more about maybe the negative side of that person. And that's going to lead me to kind of the second half of the video, which is going to be, well, then what led to his madness and or paranoia? So the first one is just obviously going to be Tywin's ambition. Tywin was someone that was trying to get the Lannisters in the line of succession. He wanted to get the Lannisters in the throne or the crown. He wanted them to be part of the crown. He was trying to accumulate as much power as possible. We know this by the way he deals with Robert Baratheon later on and getting his line, and even something that I talk about with Ned 7, the chapter I did on Tuesday. The Lannisters are everywhere. They're in all of these positions of power. They've become super powerful, to the point where Robert is going insane with how many Lannisters are around him. That's something that Aerys probably felt at this point as well. We know that Tywin was trying to get people from his family and appointments. For instance, his brother Tygett, I believe, Lannister, was, trying to become Master of Arms. Tywin wanted him to be Master of Arms. And Aerys went against this and went with William Derry, because eventually their relationship breaks down so much that Aerys basically just starts doing the opposite of what Tywin wants him to do. So if Tywin says, okay, let's lower taxes, Aerys is like, hey, let's make the taxes higher. And then what he would end up doing is then blaming it on Tywin if it didn't work. So that relationship broke down. Now, something that also needs to be kind of brought up here is Aerys was getting no credit. He was having a peaceful reign. The people were in a time of, pretty good peace and wealth. The realm was doing really, really well. And Aerys, being the king, wasn't getting any of that. Tywin was not, loved, I would say, but people knew that Tywin was the one that was actually ruling, not Aerys. And it kind of comes down to this idea that, Tywin says, is the king, or he kind of implies this when talking about Joffrey, is the king always the most powerful person? And in this situation, Tywin was really the power behind the throne. And that's something that started to play with Aerys' mind, in my opinion, never getting any credit for anything. And then you also have this idea that, is Tywin really trying to become king? Could he depose me with all of this power that he's garnering, the friends he's making? There's a lot there that could really play with Aerys' mind, and that's something that is vital to him, as we'll see the two battle for power and sway over the public over the coming years of his reign. So again, I want to point to something else that I kind of hinted at earlier on, is that when we see with Rhaella and Aerys is that they lose a lot of children. They have Rhaegar, and then there's a very big gap where we see multiple children die of stillbirth, or they're born for a little while and they die. This really compounded Aerys's madness. And we see one thing with Aerys is that regardless of how he felt about Rhaella, he was someone that he was happy to have children, regardless, it seemed like. And I think when you look at the circumstances of his children, and this is something that, again, I don't point to just Aerys, because we saw this is kind of like an inherited thing with the Targaryens, where it's got to be something wrong with someone else if the Targaryens are having stillbirths, if they're having these children that don't come out right, or they die. It has to be someone else's fault, not Aerys's, and that's something that I think is something that's been preconceived into Aerys from the beginning. It is a character flaw of his as well, not taking full responsibility for what happens. And, it's a shame to lose children, but think about it. I know we like to, sometimes paint some of these villainous characters as just walls, but as stone walls, is that think about losing children, and it seems like Aerys did love, the children that he did get. I know he has issues with Rhaegar later on, but he was someone that, we're told, on the wiki, that like he was someone that genuinely, liked having children. So when you keep losing children over and over and over again, and it's such a long gap between Rhaegar and Viserys, it can really weigh on your mind. I mean, think about someone like Rhaenyra, right? Her losing children is something that really destroys her. And it's the same with, I think, Cersei as well, and other characters to that effect. So, I mean, I personally think this is another big factor in kind of his madness. Now, again, I pointed this one out a little bit earlier on as well, but never getting any of the credit for his reign is another big one. Regardless of who was actually putting things in place, Aerys never was the person that was getting the credit for any of it. And this leads us to another point that I think I'm actually going to make a video on soon, is the betrayal at Duskendale. Now, this was a direct result of, again, Aerys and Tywin's deteriorating relationship, where, House Darkland and Duskendale as a whole were having some issues, and they wanted basically Aerys to come to Duskendale to discuss things. Because, again, they saw their way of getting what they wanted through Aerys and not Tywin, because the two had been disagreeing. So if Tywin isn't willing to give you something, then more than likely Aerys would. And Aerys then goes to Duskendale. We see he's betrayed, he's captured, eventually he's saved by Barristan. And honestly, if he wouldn't have been saved by Barristan, probably would have been a better couple, years for the Targaryens after. But with that being said, what is this going to tell Aerys? What is he going to now be thinking? He's someone that's been held prisoner. He's been betrayed. He's going to start seeing people that are going to betray him everywhere. He's going to see this everywhere. And that's going to lead us to our next major point. Varys. Varys is someone that has spies everywhere. And it's basically, I think the idea of Varys is almost like having mind control, right? People always bring up this hypothetical, like, would you want to know what someone else is thinking? Being able to read minds. Would you want to even know that? Would you want to know what everyone's thinking? Because humans just naturally can have very dark thoughts. And maybe they don't mean them, but do you want to see them? Do you really want to know what everyone thinks about you at all times? That can make you go insane. And that's what Varys basically is for the Mad King. He's this person that can tell the Mad King, yeah, this guy thinks this about you. He's doing this. He may be plotting this. It's just enough to where when you have the idea of what happens at Duskendale, compounded onto what Viserys is telling you, the paranoia that Aerys is going to be feeling, he's just going to lose his mind. And that's something that definitely compounds into him becoming mad. Now, the next point I want to bring up is Wildfire. This one I don't think is nearly as impactful as some of the other reasons as why he goes insane. But again, Wildfire becoming popularized as a major execution tool for Aerys is, again, not great. This also could have been a result of maybe having dragon dreams or anything related to the dragons coming back or just fire in general. So again, I think that's another part of it. I don't know if it's as big as some of the other ones. We don't know if Aerys like had those dragon dreams, concretely. I think it's probably likely he did, though. Now, the next one is something that I think it gets very overlooked. Now, this is the idea of a growing northern alliance against him. So one, we've already talked about this idea that Aerys is growing in his paranoia and fearing everyone betraying him. He even gets to the point where he believes that Tywin is trying to overthrow him as well. Well, if we look at what was going on in Westeros, what was the political climate right now? We see the Starks involving themselves in the south quite a lot. We see Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon being fostered at the Vale. We see marriage alliances being made with Brandon Stark and Catelyn. We see, again, this idea that people are building alliances, and what are those alliances going to be used for? Well, possibly against the throne, which is what exactly ends up happening. So when you look at all of these ideas, again, it's just more paranoia. It's more forces that could be working against Aerys and growing on his growing madness. And we have two more here that I think are really apparent. So the one of them is that Rhaegar kind of leaves for Dragonstone with Elia. And we kind of see this idea that Rhaegar and Aerys have kind of come to this point where it's like Rhaenyra and the Greens, where you have two kind of different factions, or you have, say, Aegon IV and his son Daeron II. It kind of feels like there's two factions growing here. And again, Aerys is fearing that his son is going to take over, which we know was Rhaegar's initial plan. So again, there's just so much here that points to this idea that Aerys saw enemies everywhere. And was he wrong about it? Everyone was plotting against him, it seems like. And a lot of that is probably because he wasn't a great person. He wasn't a great king. Though Westeros could do so much better. Now, the last kind of thing I want to note here is just if we look at the people surrounding Aerys, the people surrounding him after Tywin were not great. And even when Tywin was Hand of the King, Tywin had ulterior motives. But Orton Merryweather is the person that is chosen to come after Tywin. And Orton Merryweather is definitely described as someone that is kind of not competent for the role. He didn't really deserve the role. And he seemed like he was more of a flatterer. We know that Pycelle was on the small council, who was a big Tywin guy, was not loyal to Aerys at all. Again, another flatterer or fool. We saw Varys being this guy that, again, kind of was another reason as to why the Mad King went crazy. You had a Velaryon that was on this council that kind of used the Mad King for power, it would seem. It seemed like everyone that was around Aerys was using him for their own gains. It seems a lot like Aegon IV, the Unworthy, where everyone around him was just trying to gain things from him. So that is my explanation in about less than 20 minutes on the idea of why did the Mad King become mad. I think there's a lot of reasons other than just, the basic ones. I think Aerys was someone that had a very unfortunate life. He is someone that had a lot of potential, in my opinion, at the very beginning of his reign, but things just did not work out for him. So yeah, thank you guys all for watching. Let me know what you guys think on Aerys as a character. And also, again, if you did have a question for the 3,000 subscriber special, let me know down in the comments below. And bye, guys.